Hello and good morning, good afternoon on the East Coast. Welcome to Erupt. I have a wonderful guest today, James DeSimone. I'm so happy you're joining me for this specific conversation around sexual harassment in the workplace. It's an unfortunate, consistent matter. And what we'd like to do here at Erupt is give attention to conversations that are important to have in order to resolve, in order to find solutions. And I think this is absolutely one. We see rises in sexual harassment happening everywhere across the US, specifically in the workplace. And I'm going to give a little introduction of my guest because I feel like he's the perfect one to be in the hot seat on this conversation. We have James DeSimone from V. James DeSimone Law. He's one of the most highly regarded employment and civil rights attorneys in Los Angeles. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks for joining us on Erupt. James, you decided to carve out your own path by establishing V. James DeSimone Law, which is a California law firm dedicated to representing individuals in civil rights cases with an emphasis on employment discrimination and harassment. And that primarily is the topic we're going to be targeting today. So again, welcome. I'm going to start with a statistic and then I'll kind of like navigate the conversation and throw some questions your way. Because again, you are in this and heavily involved in this within your career. So I think you could shed light for us. Now, first statistic is roughly 58% of women are harassed at work and in fact don't even file a complaint. So I'm going to start there. As someone who is in the lawyer seat, why do you feel that there aren't enough people that feel comfortable to join forces with someone like yourself to get a resolution?
Well, I think the women in the workplace are confronted with the reality that although companies oftentimes have the correct policies written down on paper to deal with sexual harassment cases, that companies don't implement those policies in a fair fashion when it comes to the complaints of sexual harassment. Oftentimes, where is the avenue? If you are being sexually harassed at work, where is the avenue to complain? It's human resources, most likely. I mean, and I will talk about different ways that people can confront it in the here and now. But if you're getting harassed and you're not getting anywhere with your supervisor, maybe who's engaged in harassment, human resources is the place to go. There's a problem with that. Human resources is often not the employee's friend. Human resources is representing the company, and they want to protect the company from liability, from this getting worse. And it really is a wrong-headed approach from human resources because by taking that approach, they actually cause more problems for themselves when men and women who are sexually harassed in the workplace do step forward. But that, from the employee's perspective, that's the conundrum they face themselves in. Where do you go for relief?
Absolutely. And that let's peel that onion a little bit because we do have most companies set up where there is that human resources department, but just like you're saying, they're in a position to protect the company against liabilities and less like you're almost going in as an employee with not really having the foundation and the support, particularly around you. So, in that respect, many women or even men at this point with sexual harassment incidences do not speak up. And therefore, things increase and things get worse and bigger, more complex cases arise. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, let's keep in mind what sexual harassment is about. It's about unwelcome conduct. And so people in the workplace, I mean, look, people can fall in love in the workplace, right? I mean, there are
Mhm.
relationships that form in the workplace that are consensual, that are not an abuse of, say, a power dynamic between a supervisor and a subordinate. So it's not as if anything in terms of flirtation at work is absolutely against the law. It depends on if it's unwelcome. So that's where an employee, at the first instance of where something becomes sexual in the workplace, right? Either a joke, a text, whatever it is, the
Right. That's a good point
employee.
to make. It isn't just physical.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely not, especially in this day of information
Digital.
technology where people, where you can get people can be, you're at work and somebody sends you a friend request on Facebook. Okay, innocent enough, they're my friend. Then they start to instant message you, through that platform. So I think at the first blush, what an employee has to take a stand on, if something does cross the line, um, let them know right away. That's not appropriate. Let's just keep this to work. What I think ends up happening is those boundaries get crossed a little bit and people feel like, oh, did I somehow encourage this by not taking a stand right away? They feel guilty about that or concerned that their actions could be questioned. So in the first instance, stand your ground. I mean, unfortunately, people who are predators are going to choose their victims as people who they think they could take advantage of. And
Hmm.
so when you go into a workplace where that is a possibility, at the first instance where something crossed the lines, just let the person know that's not appropriate. Because in every sexual harassment case I've had within the last 15, 20 years, those text messages between the harasser and the harassee are, exhibit one in a case, right? And
Sure.
so what those text messages say
Proof in
are
the
very
pudding.
important, right? It is as to whether or not it was unwelcome or not. So let the person know this is unwelcome. Do it in a polite way. Don't,
Hmm.
and then if you have to go to human resources, think about the way you want to convey this complaint and do it in a way that shows the company you value your job. You just want to work in an environment that's free from harassment, and you don't want to have this type of conduct interfere with your ability to do your job. And that type of complaint will be received a lot better than if it's done a different way where you're posting on social media about being harassed or something like that. And then, then it's like, well, then you've sort of crossed the line into something inappropriate by bringing that, into
Both,
a
yes.
wider audience instead of taking the appropriate step of going within the company to get relief.
So an employee comes to work. Obviously, they want security in their job. They need that financial security. Perhaps they even like what they do, but the environment does lead to a sexual harassment scenario. They go, they speak to their boss or their higher up, say it's in fact their boss that's inflicting that. Um, they go to human resources, but there is no effort or solution. It almost hits a dead end, which leaves us to understand it's a toxic environment. Because even if I, as an employee, were to come up and state my case in the most appropriate manner, um, there are situations where it is just not coming through and you're not getting a solution. So would someone take the next step and find a lawyer like yourself to step in?
Absolutely. I mean, it's important, to try to get the ear of a lawyer who is, there to advance your best interests. If a potential client contacts us with the sexual harassment complaint, but they haven't gone through the proper channels within the company, we'll give advice to that employee. Sort of, okay, write what you would write to the employer. Well, as an attorney, if they send it to us and we help in them edit, that's attorney-client privilege. The company never has to know about that. And in many times, I've taken the time to help people in those situations, and maybe the company then does the right thing and it's not a case. Well, hey, we've just done a good a good turn in life and made the world, the workplace safer for someone. But more often than not, those complaints are not appropriately handled. You've helped the employee, the company doesn't respond appropriately, and they come back to you, but you've sort of given the company the opportunity to do the right thing. So an employee can contact an attorney like me even earlier on
Hmm.
in the process. But absolutely, I mean, if you're going to human resources and you see that they're setting up, for instance, they've hired an independent investigator to investigate the complaint. Well, that sounds great most of the time. This is an independent investigator. Well, 9 times out of 10, that independent investigator is going to be an attorney who primarily represents corporations, who knows how to set things up to protect the company, not necessarily protect the employee. So if there's an independent investigation that ensues, that's a time to get an attorney and to seek their advice on how to handle that situation. One other choice that can be made, sometimes it's hard to find an attorney. I know that. I mean, I know
Hmm.
as, someone who has been doing this work for a long time, a lot of people need our help. It's hard to help everyone who comes, even if they have halfway decent cases. if I'm involved in a trial, I can't get on the phone with someone and give them
Yeah.
advice, right? I mean, we have a team that does it. I have a whole intake team and associates. It's not just me, of course, but still, I mean, any law firm that does good work for people is going to be in high demand and they're going to be busy. So one other avenue, especially here in California, where I am, and I believe you are
Yes.
as well, Corinne, and every state has it. You could go to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing and make your complaint with them. I mean, recently we've seen the Activision Blizzard case in the news where,
Correct.
it might be hundreds of women within that company, but many women are saying we've been treated unfairly. And the tales, I shouldn't call them tales, the stories they are telling of what happened in the workplace. I mean, absolutely despicable as far as the way men are treated versus women. Well, how did that lawsuit start? The
Mm.
Department of Fair Employment and Housing filed the action against Activision Blizzard. It was not initially a private attorney like myself,
Hmm.
and so that's another avenue. You look up the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. There's two different complaints you can make. One, if you have a lawyer, you can request an immediate right to sue letter, but you can ask them to investigate this case themselves. And yes, it's going to take some time, but at least you have somebody there looking out for you, and the company has to be concerned about that if they have, it's not, a governmental entity who's
Yeah.
investigating them now.
I'm glad you brought that up because with Activision, everything I've read up on, it had become almost like a frat boy culture, right? So with this gaming world, so the World of Warcraft team noted that male employees and even their supervisors were ones that were the the ones hitting on the women. They were in the hot seat. They were the ones that were doing sort of the demeaning behavior. So when you fall into this collective where a bunch of women sort of come together to fight, where am I curious? I'm curious about the like almost statute of limitations. Like how much time do people have, an employee have, to bring up this misconduct before it becomes in the law old news and not debatable?
Sure. As an attorney, that statute of limitations is the one thing we can't get around. I mean, if a statute of limitations has passed, it can be the death knell to a case. But California has recently expanded the amount of time that you have, and these are state determinative laws. I mean, each state has its own statute of limitations for different violations, and they'll differ. I mean, if you have a
Mm.
defamation case, for instance, in California, someone says something falsely about you, it's a 1 year statute of limitations, a hard statute of limitations. Most what we call torts, legal wrongs, are 2 years. But the Department of Fair Employment and Housing has now increased their statute of limitations to 3 years, where you
Wow.
have 3 years from the date of the last incident to complain with them. Now, I would not allow, say, okay, well, I have 3 years and to put it off until the end, because the one thing that's difficult for us as attorneys is if someone's very close to the statute of limitations, it's very difficult to analyze that case such that we can take it on. And sometimes we just have to say, I'm sorry, we can't help you.
Mm.
You've just waited too long if it's a more complex situation. I used to make the joke, it's not like we're 7-Eleven and you come in and you get your lawsuit, it takes us time and we have an obligation to investigate the facts to make sure that we're putting on cases that have truth to them, which is always important to us. I mean, we want to be representing employees who have truly been wronged in the workplace. And I always tell people, I'm a truth seeker. I want to
Hmm.
find out the truth and I want to get justice in those cases where their rights have been violated through an abuse of power or something like sex harassment, and vindicate those rights in court. So it's an important consideration.
Yes, absolutely. Another case to bring up, even, and I know you're very familiar with this, but Magic Castle, located here in Los Angeles, which is an exclusive club for magicians. There's been a lot of word around multiple incidents from a bartender, from another employee who was running the floor. So there's a lot to unpack here specifically, but I'm going to let you just sort of give us a little landscape of how someone's can. I know this is a case you litigated, so what have you learned from an incident such as this coming from this exclusive club based here in LA?
Well, with the Magic Castle, I mean, here's a place that brings so much joy and entertainment to people. It's very
Right.
exclusive to get into, and what even to go as and enjoy, you have to be invited. It's not just open to the public where you can go to each night, and it's described as this wonderful place. But unfortunately, it became a nightmare for women who work there and in many different forms. And we do represent an employee. I won't specifically speak about her case because we're in litigation right now about it, and some things are happening. But I will say this: I do see that the Magic Castle, some of the individuals in management who were responsible for that, are no longer there. And
Mm.
this is where the fact that this became front page news in the Los Angeles Times, and you had investigative reporters who spoke with our client and others and were able to delve into the situation and get information, which really made a difference. Because then all of a sudden, when people read about that in the newspaper, people who are other victims, they say, hey, me too, right? You know, that,
Sure.
and so other people come forward and they become emboldened to come forward because they know they're not alone. I mean, we see that, we see that happening in the prosecution of R. Kelly in New York right now, where, for, years he was able to abuse his power and, degrade and humiliate women in just the worst of ways, in terms of his conduct. I mean, following the trial in New York, it's just some of the stuff is just disgusting. Well, what enabled prosecutors in New York to be able to bring forth that case? The fact that it started getting publicity and other women who were victims came forward, and there was strength in the numbers.
Do you find that since, I mean, social media obviously plays a part in this, and people really seeing a lot of news flashes and comments way easier than they did a decade or even longer, right? So you have a case like R. Kelly, where someone is in such a high level or a position of power where many would be like, oh, not him, or he himself feels he can get away with just about anything because of who he was. Similarly, with Cuomo, would you say somebody who is in a position of power as well, in a different landscape, of course, but now I don't know if you saw, but we have the Times CEO sort is now stepping down to, as she was kind of in the mix of trying to withhold information about Cuomo. So it's almost like further extended cases. There's like the primary ones based off of the women that he specifically harassed, and then now other people trying to avoid or sugarcoat truth or communication around the case as well that can also be faulted and litigated, I guess. Am I correct?
Well, sure. I mean, it goes back to, human resources enabling this type of conduct by failing to take appropriate corrective action when it first comes to light. So you have a situation where and Andrew Cuomo apparently had been using his position of power to, he sees it as, I'm not sexually harassing women. Well, there are some physical assaults there that, seem that there's not a gray area here. But, he's it's always a situation where if you have someone who's in power and you're dealing with someone in a subordinate position, and you as a person in that position of power are trying to use that in order to end up engaging in sexual relations with that person, it's rarely appropriate. It really is rarely appropriate. And men and women who are in those positions of power should realize that and not abuse it and not take advantage of it. But yes, the people around them, I mean, we have the same situation with cases going on in the city of Los Angeles right now, too, with our mayor. The people around them should not enable And I'm not saying the mayor of Los Angeles was involved in this. This was people who are below him. But
Sure.
the mayor, our mayor is basically being brought into it by saying, you didn't do the right thing,
Right.
and the city attorney didn't do the right thing when these things became apparent. So in those situations, the people around them have to be have to take care of them in a way not to enable them to sexually harass others, to say you shouldn't be doing this, and if you do it, I'm going to be faced in this position of where I'm going to have to support the people you're harassing because it's against the law. It takes a lot to do that. It does. But I think that if employers would truly have human resources departments that try to do the right thing and meaningfully investigate these cases and take appropriate corrective action in the workplace, which they are under an absolute legal obligation to do. Under the Fair Employment and Housing Act, companies have an affirmative obligation to take all reasonable steps to prevent any type of harassment in the workplace. And so if the message that comes across is that this, not just this, we have a zero tolerance policy. You said zero tolerance, and then it's like,
Yeah.
well, what does that mean? It's like it's the old thing. Deeds, not words. You can say it, but you need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Absolutely. And would you agree that for the Time's Up CEO, Tina Shen, that she did the right thing by stepping down? Do you think she even had a choice?
Well, I think that Cuomo stepped down. If she believes that she had a conflict of interest and in some way was facilitating this type of conduct, that I think the right thing to do in that situation is to step down. You would never want the controversy about yourself
Sure.
to end up being greater than the important issue at hand, which is, look, people, we all, most of us have to work to make a living, right? um,
All
it's the reality, and it's a good reality. But when people step into the workplace, they should be able to step in a workplace where their work is what is being honored, and not their acquiescence to sexual conduct by others.
Absolutely. So, just to sort of begin the ending of our conversation, what would you say is most important as far as best practices in companies to ensure for future these scenarios do not exist and do not happen?
Well, first of all, you have to get that message out to your employees and to your supervisors in a way that is real, in terms of, we have these seminars sometimes that companies put on, and then the seminars become more fodder for sex harassment because they give all these examples and people talk about it. So you really need to get the message out to everyone in the company that look, we take this seriously. We value everyone who works for our company, and we want to treat them with respect and dignity. Because a lot of times what companies do, the mistake they make is they say, well, we're not, if it's not sexual harassment, then we can't do anything about it. But sex harassment can also be hostile. You can
Sure.
use words of a sexual nature in a hostile way, and that can still constitute sexual harassment, even if the person says, well, I didn't want to, sleep with them or be with them. That doesn't matter. You're using this in a way that harasses them in the workplace and causes them to have a hostile work environment in the workplace. So companies have to, make sure that people are treated with respect and dignity. And in too many industries, the people who are in charge believe that that gives them a license to abuse those who are underneath them. Good companies make sure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity, no matter what. And if you start from that premise, right, you're less likely to have people who are going to be sexually harassed in the workplace, because any type of harassment is just not allowed within the company. But when someone complains of sexual harassment, it is important to, one, meaningful investigate and come at it from an unbiased way. If someone within the company is, even if they're higher up and even if they're making money for you, harassing people who are under them, that's not the type of person you want in that company. So by taking appropriate corrective action in the first instance, whether it means firing the person if it does, if it's really bad conduct, or whether it means giving them a last chance agreement to, look, you can't do this. We want you to stay in the company, but if you do it again, you're getting terminated, and have them acknowledge that in writing. That's the kind of thing that could put the stop to it. But far too often, Corinne, what we really see when our clients complain is the companies do an investigation, the conduct gets whitewashed. Our clients are told, we investigated, we took appropriate corrective action. Maybe they've told the person, don't talk to them, don't do this anymore. But
Mm,
nothing's in their file or anything like that. There's no real consequence. So what ends up happening? Human nature. The person who complains gets retaliated against,
sure.
whether it's direct retaliation, they end up losing their job over something else. And that's why, from the employee perspective, I always tell people, go through the proper channels, but make sure that you don't leave your flank open, so to speak, by breaking the rules and
Sure,
giving them
you're
an
almost
excuse
put,
to fire
you
you.
speak up because of an incident like that made you feel uncomfortable, but then they're looking to maybe nick you for something else, you showing up late, and they start docking you for other unnecessary things related to your work in order to almost get you fired.
Well, yes, yeah, it happens all the time. I always give my clients, it's an old example, but I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and Jackie Robinson, who of course broke the color barrier for Major League Baseball and had to endure these racial epithets and death threats to play baseball. And what did he do? He held his head up high, he didn't let it bother him, and he kept going. And the fact that he comported himself in that manner, he's a hero to so many. A movie's
Sure.
made about him, and it's a wonderful story. I just had a client this weekend who messaged me, and she's like, I was giving her advice behind the scenes last year, and she was complaining more about gender discrimination, and I kept telling her, just stay the course. You're doing a great job. Keep doing the appropriate thing. She texts me as I'm leaving town. She says, guess what? I'm the boss now. I got promoted. and so it was this wonderful situation where the fact that she didn't go off the rails when she was pissed off enough to go off the rails, and justifiably so, but you just can't do it. You've got to interact with the company in a way that shows the company that you're a good person to stay in the company. I was just so happy to hear that
Absolutely. That's
that she
so
got
great and
she
satisfying to you as well.
Absolutely, and it was well deserved. She was a great employee. So, the first thing is you're there to do work for the company, right?
Right.
Assuming you're getting a paycheck there, keep doing a good job for the company, and hopefully that will be rewarded. If it's not rewarded at that company, it'll be rewarded at the next. From the company's perspective, don't be on the side where you're saying the person who's complaining is the problem, because what is that going to result in? That's going to result in somebody like me coming in and
Hmm.
getting a big verdict in front of a jury, and it's going to cost your company more money in terms of the money that the lawsuit costs, but it also looks very bad when the company is not handling sexual harassment complaints properly, and it has its effect in the marketplace where people don't want to do business with that company when things like that happen.
Just curious, when it comes to you representing employees in sexual harassment cases, are you, when you look at the ratio, is it more times than not that the company or the boss that maybe was in the hot seat are the ones to not get away with it, but end up getting out of the situation with a slap on the wrist, as opposed to what you feel that they personally should have deserved due to the circumstance?
No, absolutely, and especially the cases that end up coming to me is in those situations where that occurs. So, I do acknowledge that there's times when someone gets complained about and the company goes overboard and maybe immediately terminates someone by not performing an investigation. Again, be that truth seeker. The
Sure.
companies should go in, and so many times what I see is they question the victim, they question the person who's supposed to be the harassment, they don't do anything else. Other people know.
Hmm.
Question the other people in the workplace and let them know that they are encouraged to tell the truth,
Sure.
and don't shade the truth so that you're looking for an answer that makes the person, that basically you want the person to say that person didn't harass them, because oftentimes people will say what they think the person questioning wants to hear. Make it fair. let's
Proper
make
chains of command, communication, authenticity, and just, I think, keeping record of things that may possibly make someone feel uncomfortable as well is important. Making sure that you have the record and the proof as well.
Corinne, you're absolutely right. From the employee's perspective, it's very important to put things in writing and to do it in a way that is respectable. I just had
Yeah.
a case where my client's like, oh, I was typing on my phone, like it's fraught with all these typos. Nobody ever reads an email at 11 o'clock at night, or so, like take your time to go back on a computer and make it make sense, because these are very emotional situations, understandably so. So, you could see why someone would write something in very emotionally charged. It's always a good advice, no matter what we do when we email people, right? When
Emotions
we're
out.
emotionally charged, to sort of take a step back, give it a half hour, give it a day, whatever it's going to take to go back, reread it, and make sure that you are portraying yourself in a way that makes the company know that this is someone who really wants to do good work for us and is just getting mistreated in the workplace, and that is important. But you have a legal obligation as an employee to let the company know about the sex harassment before you take legal action. If you take legal action, you haven't let the company know, they could say, well, there's a violation, but you get no compensation whatsoever because you didn't give the company the opportunity to do the right thing. They may not always do the right thing, but at least give them the opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. Well, we absolutely hope that people getting back to work and getting back into offices after obviously this year and a half of a pandemic where most were now working from home, that when everyone's back and collaborating and in these workspaces, that they do take your advice, James, that they are transparent and they are respectful of one another, and they are honest and true to who they are, and allow everyone to have their space to really excel in their craft and excel in their jobs and not have to be inflicted in any capacity with this sexual harassment energy that's just, no one should ever have to deal with it. So, James, I appreciate your time with us here at Erupt. It was really enlightening. I know you're in Napa, so I'm going to let you get back to having some wine. You are so wonderful. You're recognized as one of the top labor and employment attorneys by the Los Angeles Daily Journal, which in fact is California's leading legal publication. So for you to take time to kind of unpack this conversation with us is really empowering, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much, Corinne. I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully, we all try to do a little good in the world, and hopefully our conversation today will help someone.
Absolutely. And if there's anyone out there that may be faced with any circumstances such as this, and they perhaps wanted to reach you in any way, if there's a platform, email, or perhaps a website that they can go to for more information.
Yeah, our website is my name, vjamesdsimonelaw.com. I'm very findable, civil rights lawyer Jim DeSimone under Instagram. I do all my own social media, and so but our office phone number 310-693-5561. We have folks answering the phones to help. But if you want to find me, James DeSimone, civil rights lawyer, Google, you'll be able to find me, and we'll do our best to help.
James, you are wonderful. We here at Erupt hope to have these open conversations, especially where differences can sometimes lie. And thanks for shedding light and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks so much, Corinne. Really enjoyed it. And you have a great day as well. Thank you.
You too. Have a good one. Bye, all.
All right.